send it to a professional who like has a taste that doesn't align with yours. Like there's no there's so many versions of acceptable and good that like it all just boils down to like, it has to sound the way you want in the end. But yeah, it can be really hard to nail that down. Some people aren't good at explaining the way that they want it to sound. Yeah, so there's a whole like, I don't even know. There's a whole like philosophy to how to decipher that stuff from musicians in particular.
Yeah, and I imagine that as an engineer, who works with a huge dynamic variety of
Sure.
artists,
Yeah.
um, you've probably gotten a little bit better at being able to maneuver through that language a little bit better, so that when
Yeah.
somebody
Yeah.
when somebody says something to you, it's a little bit more vague, like, well, we're going for something that sounds a little bit more like Nirvana or something,
Yeah.
then you can kind of interpret that and say, okay, like
Sure.
they want to use these kind of cabinets with these kind of amps, and they're maybe use these
Sure.
kind of like filters, like whatever. But yeah, I mean, because I mean, I can remember using phrases like that, when I went in and it's like, well, we're going for something that kind of sounds like this album or something, and
I mean, that's helpful. Honestly, that's like for when people can't explain, what it is, what they want to hear. It's best to say like, well, what are some albums that you really like, or that you like the sound of? And it's important to differentiate the difference between an album that you just like because the songs are really good, or an album that you like because it actually sounds really good. And so, and those are usually two very different things. Like half the time when somebody gives me a reference for sound, it's not because they like the sound, it's because they like the band and they like the songs or whatever. And so you have to, it's important to kind of get into that, to be like, well, I could make your record sound like this, but I think you'd be really disappointed. So like you have to like, I don't know, it's a lot to navigate, but yeah, you just have to know the questions to ask, really.
Yeah, definitely. Curious, over the years, I mean, because you've had this long-term relationship with bands like Deaf Heaven and Jeff Rosenstock.
Yeah.
Are there any bands that you've had like one shot with that you really felt like super proud of the output? And I mean, I'm sure that you are pretty stoked on like everything you've done for the most part, but like,
I
does any
mean,
kind of stand out?
uh, I'm at a stage right now where I wish I could record and or remix like every record I've ever worked on. But because I in this quarantine in particular, I kind of like went into the weeds of like mixing and mastering and stuff like that. And I feel like right now everything's sounding like much better than it ever has. And I wish I could go and redo shit. I don't know. I mean, yeah, to some degree, most records that I've worked on have been a positive experience. I either like the music or I like the people, or the process is educational. Like it's always educational to some degree.